Hello and welcome to another edition of Up Close. We are coming to you from the Three Angels Seventh-day Adventist Church in Wichita, Kansas, where we have a live audience participating with us, and we're happy that you're able to join us too. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that we often don't want to think about, and yet one that we can't get around. Experiencing the death of a loved one is something we've all had to face sooner, or all will have to face sooner or later, and many of us have already dealt with it. We have some very special guests with us today. In fact, we have two families who've gone through the tragedy of losing a loved one, and we also have a chaplain from one of the largest hospitals in the country. And we're going to be talking about how we can cope with the pain and loss, and also how we can help others get through it. Our first guest today will be Mike McKinnon from Tampa, Florida. Mike has been a biker for most of his life, and he lived a lifestyle that was not the healthiest. He became addicted to drugs and alcohol, and after hitting bottom, he got clean and sober through a 12-step program about 16 years ago, and his life changed drastically. But although he believed in God, and his wife and daughter had started attending the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Mike was not interested at all. He especially didn't want to hear anything about Jesus Christ. But all of that changed, and Mike's here to tell us what happened. Things were going pretty well for Mike and his family, but one night tragedy struck. His daughter Autumn was engaged to a young man named Jason, and one night they called and said they were coming over, but they never showed up. And here's what happened next.
We must have went to bed sometime late that night. Early that morning, Doreen had got up early and she was trying to still call and she didn't hear. And then our friend who lived right across the street from Autumn called and asked why there were some police cars over at Autumn's house. Of course, Doreen, she got kind of hysterical and tried to call her cell phone again, and the highway patrol answered. And right then, Doreen knew something was wrong. And he said they don't normally do this over the phone, but there had been an accident about 3 in the morning, and they'd been trying to get in touch with somebody, and that her and Jason had been killed in a car accident. It's strange how in that split second your whole life can change.
Isn't that true? Just in one split second your life can change. Many people become, should I say, very angry with God when they lose a loved one. Some feel that God should have prevented their death, and others feel like God has taken a loved one from this earth. Here's how Mike reacted to his loss.
I was right from the start, I was angry with God. See, Autumn had been she'd been such a good kid. The pastor comes, and I meet him for the first time. A young pastor, he was 25, 26 years old, full of energy. You know, I thank God so much today that he didn't come in and tell me that it would be okay, that he had an answer. Because first thing he told us, he didn't have any answer for what happened. He understood it any more than we did.
That was a wise young pastor to just know that probably just to be there was the most important thing. We're glad today that Mike McKinnon is with us. We want to welcome him to the program today. Mike, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being willing to share such, things that are close to your heart. So this loss, you, like you said, just in a split second, things can change. You would never have thought that when that baby was born, would you?
No, you never think about you never think about your children dying before you. You know, as time goes on, you think your parents, they're getting older, you see it coming, so you kind of prepare, but you never prepare for your child. Just at a complete loss when it happened. didn't have any. I'm thankful. 11 years of her life, she only knew one thing. Me drinking, riding motorcycles and drugs. But the Lord helped me for the last 11 years of her life. She saw a different side. And that was a blessing. Even though I didn't know Jesus, didn't want to know him. Knew God, I thought that was enough.
Well, you know, you were talking before the program about having to make the arrangements for the burial, and what were some of the hardest things that you had to deal with?
Oh, you go to the funeral home and you have to pick out a casket. You have to decide where they're going to be buried. And this is the morning after, and you're just in total shock. We looked around, and we found this place that when we saw it, we knew. She loved cows. Her whole house she had the walls painted like a big brown cow. And the floors were black and white. And we saw this place that had cows right behind it. And there were some cows up at the fence, so that was something the Lord did for us. Gave her a place to be.
It must have been hard picking that site. Although Mike coped as best as he knew how, he could not let go of his anger against God. At the same time, his wife and daughter started finding more and more support in the church and were studying to be baptized. Mike, tell us about that.
This young pastor, Pastor Andrew Moreno, he was our youth pastor at our church, and he was coming over after the accident, and my wife, she had told me she wanted to wait on me to be baptized, but she said she couldn't wait any longer. And so he started coming over, and I got to know him a little bit. I'd joke around with him. He'd laugh, I'd laugh. They'd go into the dining room to do their lesson, and I'd be sitting in the other room, and I'd be cracking jokes at them as they were going through, but I was listening too. And I was so angry. Why would a God do this to a good kid? You read in the paper, so many out there that are doing things that they shouldn't be doing. But I heard, and I started listening, and somewhere along the way I decided that I needed that.
So you started to join in on the Bible studies?
No, not exactly. I listened, and I started going to church a little bit with them, and then going to the dinners on Saturday afterwards.
Well, those
dinners. Started participating with the cleanup a little bit. And then I told Andrew one day that I wanted to be baptized with my family.
Before that happened, you said that your anger continued to grow. Mike knew that he needed to let go of it, but he just didn't know how. So he asked his friends what he should do, and their answer was pretty unusual. What did they say when you talked to your friends?
Well, I go to a 12-step program, and I still participate even today. And it's a good thing to stay involved. And I was sharing about how angry I was with God, and they said, well, what do we do when we're angry at somebody else? We pray for them. Pray for them to have a good day. And I said, well, I could do that. And I prayed for God to have a good day. And that helped. Before long, I was listening more to the Bible studies.
A miracle happened in Mike's life as he continued to pray. Here's what he had to say.
Somewhere along the line, I quit asking God why. I guess the next question that I was asking him, what can I do so that one day maybe I could see her again? And then I started finding out through the Bible about Jesus and the love that he brought to us and how he freely gave it to us. And he didn't want anything in exchange. The only thing he asked for us to do is tell somebody about him. That was such an easy thing to do. But you know what I found? That more people were seeing it because I wasn't doing the same things that I had done for years. I could always be abusive to people. but I wasn't abusive. I had to live up to this. I thought I was a biker for years. Today, I just want to be a Christian. I want to be a better one than I was yesterday. That's one of my prayers. Help me to be a better Christian today than I was yesterday. Because yesterday I wasn't as good. I hope I'll be better tomorrow.
That's a wonderful prayer. Has he answered that prayer for you?
Many times over. My life has changed drastically. I'm involved in men's ministry at our church. We have breakfasts every Sunday morning. I give of myself today. It's instead of taking, it's what I can give today. You know, my question for a long time, it was, what could God do for me? Today it's, what can I do for God?
Amen. That's wonderful. You know, there's that song that says that every day with Jesus is sweeter than the day before, and that sounds like what you're saying.
That's what I find every day when I read my lesson or just read something in the Bible. It comes across how much more precious life is. And then what Jesus did for us by coming and walking in my shoes. Now, I'll never be able to fill them shoes that he walked in. Right. But maybe I could just walk beside him.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mike, for sharing your story. Our next guest is a chaplain from one of the largest hospitals in the country, and she deals with thousands of patients and their families each year who face serious disease and terminal illnesses. So don't go away. We'll be right back to talk to this chaplain.
Next week on Up Close.
We'll center on one of the most pervasive problems of our generation, drug addiction. There is great hope for recovery, as Amanda is a testimony to.
When I met Amanda was during the time that she was pregnant and Dave was just getting out of prison and those kind of things, and so I work with addicts. And the only thing I know for sure about God and about recovery is God does amazing things with us.
You know, I didn't realize that slowly I was being dragged into this world that was going to take me 7 years to get out of.
Next week on Up Close, escaping drugs and alcohol addictions. Don't miss it.
Welcome back to Up Close. We just heard from Mike McKinnon, who shared his story about the loss of his daughter and how he struggled with being angry with God. And we want to find out more about the process of grieving. Our next guest is Marty Jones, the chaplain for Florida Hospital, or one of the chaplains in Orlando, one of the largest hospitals in the country. As a matter of fact, it's, I think, one of the largest in the nation, around the world, they say. It's a huge complex. So we're glad you're here, Marty, and we'd just like to welcome you. Let's welcome Marty.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So good to be with you.
Well, you know, Mike told us about his loss. You were listening in on that, and how that in a split second everything changed, and how there was, just a complete change in his life. Is it common for people to go through this kind of experience, this kind of stages, if you will, of being angry with God?
Absolutely. In fact, what he was displaying was very normal, very human. We go through stages of, the initial, we can say, shock, numbness. Then we can even go through a stage of denial, where we just can't believe it's true. Then, of course, the stage that Mike mentioned, which was anger. There's a stage where we bargain. And then, of course, finally, there's this stage of what we call acceptance of something we can't change. So what he felt was very, very normal and very common, and something that I believe is a good process to go through.
So when someone comes to you and they're just angry, they're just bitter about what happened, what do you do to help someone like that?
Well, you listen. It's just amazing what listening will do. Mike mentioned, for instance, that this young pastor didn't come in with any little pat answers and explain to him what he was feeling, because the pastor had no clue what Mike was feeling or his family. And so he was very wise in saying right up front, I don't have any answers. And because he lent his friendship and continued to come and just listen and be available, that was really what Mike needed and his family more than anything.
What if someone's angry for a number of years? Is that different?
Sure. Anything that hangs on you so that it, in essence, begins to hurt you, you know how that is, don't you? You hold on to resentment and to anger, and pretty soon, whoever you're angry at, they're not being affected, but guess who is? You are. Your health, your state of being, other relationships are being affected by your anger, so that would not be a healthy response for long term.
Coming up next, we're going to hear from a lady who found out that her husband was terminally ill with cancer, and how she and her 3 young children coped with the death of their father. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Are you grieving the loss of a loved one? Do you find yourself struggling to understand God in your sorrow? What about your children? How do you help them? We have just the books for you. Call or write today to receive your free gift of The Ultimate Survivor and Helping Kids Deal with Death. Just write to us at Up Close, Post Office Box 220, West Frankfort, Illinois, 62896. Or call us during regular business hours, 800-752-3226 or 618-627-4651. Ask for Up Close offer number 1.
Welcome back to Up Close. We're talking today about how to cope with illness or the death of a loved one. And next we're going to hear from Debbie Edgerton from Orlando, Florida. Debbie and her husband, Brent, had already been through a lot in their life with miscarriages, serious illnesses, and finally the loss of a job. Then God led them to Hinsdale, Illinois, and it seemed like their dreams were coming true. Brent had a new job, and they had a new home, and they thought they could finally put their tragedies behind them. But things can change very quickly, as they soon found out. Brent had gotten a small tumor removed a few years earlier, and when they went back to the hospital for a checkup, they weren't ready for what they found. Listen to what Debbie shared with us.
And sure enough, the next day they did the MRI, and they said the tumor's back. It's twice as big as it was before. And then they walked out of the room, and we were left there. And we cried. And we said, this is going to be bad, but maybe there's hope. And we prayed, and we got on the phone, and we called his family. And his 2 brothers and his sister and his mom and dad were all in Illinois within about 48 hours. To tell the children that Daddy's tumor was back, and our oldest son really cried, and he was so sad. And he was old enough to grasp. He says, Mommy, people with cancer die. When will Daddy die?
Wow. I guess Debbie was a friend of yours there in Orlando before she moved, and then after she moved to Hinsdale. Is that right?
Actually, Debbie and I met just this last year.
Is that right?
And during the holiday, interesting enough, God brought us together on a chance meeting in a mutual friend's home for a holiday get-together. And that's how we met. She told me her story and what she had gone through. And it was through that experience that she had an opportunity to share it at 3ABN.
How do you deal with realities like this? You know, you see thousands of patients a year, and you're with them when they get the test results. And you probably have heard people that have gone through this, and this is just one of many. But well, how do you deal with that?
Well, we notice her, just her own words here. They're beautiful. You know, sometimes we skip over feelings. We miss something when we do that. One of the things that we try to do in ministry is to walk the journey with the individual. Debbie and her husband had small children to deal with. They had to begin to prepare them, to get them ready. It wasn't even as if they could say, it's just between you and I, and we'll go through this together. Now the children are involved, and they have to find a way to let the children know that things are very bad without destroying all hope in them. That's a difficult place to find yourself. What's really special and important is to keep the link, the connection in the family. In other words, the openness. Being able to share with your children and then allow them the same time that you have had to accustom themselves to the news, because they go through shock, they go through the denial, they can't believe this is happening. So a lot of patience on the side of the parents, even though they themselves are hurting.
Some of the kids maybe never have even thought about these issues, or, you know, it's not like most of the storybooks out there and say, and then Spot the dog died. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever read a book like that.
No.
So they're not really dealing with those kind of things.
No. And of course you don't expect it typically at that age. Brent was a young man. It wasn't as if that was an anticipated end to this story. It would have been much better for them, and they lived happily ever after, you know, in their new location, in their new home. Mm-hmm. But we know that in this life there are going to be illnesses, there are going to be deaths, and so the question remains, how do we as Christians cope with these things and help our children, our family, to cope with it?
As things progressed and Debbie realized that they were not able to do anything, her big question was, how do I tell the kids? Listen to what she said about this.
The day before we brought him home, the day before, I told the kids that Daddy wasn't going to survive this illness. I realized I needed a lot of grace. I realized I was very angry. And I said, I need some time alone before I deal with this. So I had someone take the kids for me for 24 hours. And his sister and his parents stayed with him in the hospital. And I took 24 hours to pray. And I said I didn't want any visitors at the house. And I just needed some time alone with God. And I called several healthcare institutions. Is there anything we can do? And there's nothing. We had sent his records all over the place. And so I cried and I told God I wasn't happy with this outcome. And how could I tell my children? And the last time Britt and I had talked about it, the most important thing for us is that our children didn't reject Jesus, because this prayer wasn't answered. And that we had Brent anointed early on. And with anointing, there's 3 healings. There's the healing of the Spirit, which God always offers. There's the healing of the body miraculously, which hadn't occurred in our case. And there's the healing of the body and spirit over time, which sometimes medical science can do. And none of that had happened. We were left with the answer that I love you and I healed your spirit, but you're going to lose your life.
Well, you can really sense the pain of having to process those things, what to do. And I'm sure you've been there many times too, where you're at an anointing service and the children know about that and the expectations are perhaps raised. How do you talk to children when they're at an anointing service?
Well, of course, the main thing, again, is to explain. Debbie said it so beautifully. You know, God always offers us healing, spiritual healing. That's always guaranteed 100%. We know, all of us who have been touched by death, you know, I buried our first son. And so in my ministry, that has been helpful to me in dealing with children and with families and reminding them that not everyone is going to be healed from physical ailment. In fact, sometimes we judge faith by whether or not people are healed, almost assuming that if we have enough faith, everybody would be healed. Well, I happen to know that's not true. I buried my first son, nearly buried my second, and I know that there are bad things that happen in this world, and that the main thing for me is to get across to the children that, yea, though I walk through the shadow and valley of death, I need not fear any evil, because he's with me. He really is. And so children can understand that, kind of like mommy and daddy being with them when it's dark and holding their hand. And in the same way, Jesus is with us even when things get very dark. It's very important to keep talking about it to children. Children don't get it just from the first time. And so even if they're in an anointing service, I always take the time to just hold them, to explain what is happening, what is about to happen, and that we are asking for the Holy Spirit to be with Daddy, to heal him or to walk with him through this whole illness.
Is it good to have the children there for that prayer or not?
I believe that it is at a certain age. Some children are too young and they wouldn't be able to understand, and in fact they become confused by what's going on. But at an age when a child is mature enough to understand, and you're explaining things and they want to be a part, and you can even say, would you like to go in and participate? If the child is willing, that's a good experience for them.
Debbie was anxious about talking with the children, as you can tell. As Debbie told the kids, here is how they responded.
My 10-year-old, with the wisdom of a child, stopped crying first and said, Mommy, well, at least we had a really good daddy while we had one. And Daddy always taught us in Sabbath school, and Daddy wasn't mean to us, and Daddy played with us, and he was always he'd read us our story, and he would talk to us about God, and he believes in God, and he's not leaving because he wants to. He's only leaving because he has to. And he said, I know lots of my friends whose dads are gone because they're chosen to be gone or because there can't be nice people. And he said, I'm just really glad we had a nice dad, that I can always hold on to the fact that he really loved us. And then my 13-year-old dried his tears and they both started talking about the good things that their dad had done with them. And then my little girl started piping up, yeah, he did this, and he played with me, and he used to call me his little squirrel girl. And so what I was fearful would have been an unbearable time, that maybe I'd bitten off more than I could chew. Maybe I should have had backup help to explain this to the kids. It started turning into a powerful time of sharing that showed me that God was speaking to these children, that he would be there for me. Psalm 68:5 says, I will be a father to the fatherless, and I will be a defender of widows. And I could claim that I could see already. Jesus was helping me parent these children, and he was speaking to them to help them get through this great loss that they would feel.
Well, that's touching, isn't it? That just brings tears to my eyes to have to process that. Mm-hmm. You know, she was nervous about including these children, but the Lord was speaking to those children. Do you see that?
Absolutely. And remember, too, that Debbie took 24 hours. Remember, she said she had a friend take the children for those 24 hours. She needed time to talk alone with God. And my friends, we need that communion. We need his wisdom. We don't have, in the fleshly wisdom, the wisdom that God has. Doesn't he say, my ways are higher than yours, even as the heavens are higher than the earth? And so here the Lord honored that time that she spent with him by already being that companion that she would need in the days to come. How beautiful is the evidence of that? The children indeed were becoming the comfort to their mother. Beautiful.
Now, Mike, I understand that from your story that you one of your children was killed, but you had one that was remaining.
Yes.
And how did it go when you talked with? Was it Amber that was remaining? How did that go?
She withdrew into a shell, and she was going to a place called the Refuge, which was a Christian rock refuge place, but she was withdrawing. But since then, because it was Autumn and her had just finally made friends, 7 years apart in age, and they were getting to be friends. But since that time, she's come to an understanding.
And you talk with her a lot, or her mother did, or how did that work? How did she come to that understanding?
We were always there, open. We would talk about Autumn and how we missed her and she would talk with us and share about missing her. And Pastor Andrew gave very good support, tried to get her to include her in anything that was activity that was going on.
So it is important to include children in these discussions and letting them know of your feelings and not trying to be the strong person.
I believe that. I believe also with what Ms. Moartea said, that at a certain age, you have to include them. When we went to the funeral home, she went with us. We didn't want her to feel excluded. She was 13. We wanted her to feel like she was part of this, because she was. Your children are part of what's going on in your life.
And you know, that's a very healthy thing, too, that we keep the memory of that precious loved one alive and talk about that person and express, you know, these memories, the things that we enjoyed, the way God brought us near to each other, the relationships and what made it so beautiful and what made us family so special together. Sometimes people think that's going to bring up the bad feelings, but really it allows people to express their feelings and thus heal. So expression of our feelings is a task that we need to go through as we're grieving for the loss of a loved one.
We've talked a little bit about what to do after someone dies, but what do you say? You know, Debbie, her husband was going to die. What do you say to somebody who is facing death? You probably have been involved in that many times, but what should someone say to a family member?
Well, I think just number one, validating for them what they're feeling at the moment. For instance, if a family member comes to me and says, Chaplain, we just found out my mom's report is positive and we're going to lose her. At that moment, you're not going to sit there and talk to them long. I usually will take and embrace them. That's the first thing that I do. I don't have to say anything, because at that moment, what that person needs to know is that someone cares about the pain that we're going through. Someone is going to be there to walk through us. So many times our presence, our very presence, not saying anything, just holding someone's hand, reaching over and letting them know that you're sensing their hurt. I can see your hurt, and I'm here for you right now. That is so important. Start out small and don't allow yourself to get stuck in the idea that I have to remedy this for them, because you can't.
And then after you've done that, is there anything that you could or should say? What would you say?
I would say to them, just like in Mike's case where the pastor kept coming over regularly, on a regular interval, and I would say, how are you doing today? How are you dealing today with what news you received 2 days ago? And let them express to me how they are and where they're at, because that's very important. They may be in anger. They may be in stages of denial. I need to know that in order to help them.
So you would say is it possible for someone after they've processed that, and I know that's a process, but have you seen people come to peace with the fact that they may die very soon?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, peace is where we want to get, isn't it? Where we want to get for the person who is ill and about to die, and for those who maybe are around them and preparing for that. In Mike's case, it was a shock. He didn't have time to prepare for that. That was particularly difficult.
Well, we want to look at a clip now that shows us Debbie's husband, Brent, his last prayer. And I think this will be very meaningful.
We were sitting watching some show, and he said, turn the TV off. We need to pray. And I was surprised because was very lucid that day, and he'd been kind of in and out for a few days. And I said, okay. And we turned the TV off, and we came around, and his sister and I, one on each side of the bed. And he said, I'll pray first, and then you pray. I said, okay. And he prayed, thanking God for all his blessings, thanking God for a wonderful life, for being born into a good home, and for being able to create a good home, thanking God for his children and his wife. And he said, thank you, Jesus, that you'll welcome me into your arms. And then he prayed for us, that God would bless us, and that we would go on to live happy, productive lives. And he said, Lord, make all their memories good ones. Brent prayed that prayer on October 8, and he died on October 9. And it's been a big comfort to the kids and I to know that the day before he died, he knew he was going to die, and his focus was on meeting Jesus. And he wasn't bitter, and he wasn't angry. He was sorry to lose the fact that he wouldn't get to watch his kids grow up. But he was at peace with his Savior.
Wow, last words are so important. And, you know, boy, I tell you, that's just touching. When I saw these clips before we were preparing, it just brings tears to your eyes, but beautiful tears.
That's right.
You've seen a lot of people die. Is it better to die knowing God or not knowing God?
Absolutely knowing Him. In fact, you know, it's very interesting, Don, but I have never had occasion at someone's bedside who is dying who have said to me, oh, you know, I had these many titles behind my name, or I had these many homes, or I was successful because this is what I acquired in life, or this is who I had become. What they talk to me about is their relationships. Either they are saying to me, oh, I wish I'd taken more time with my family. Sometimes they'll be alone completely. The only one who is there is the chaplain who is ministering to that family. And you know in your heart that you're not making up for the loss of that family. And you think to yourself how different it is for a person who is dying, who has their family around them, and who knows that love and that caring. And like Brent, had this sense about thanking God, right? Make all your petition known to God with thanksgiving for what He had done for him, the beautiful family that He had given him. He had hope. And that's the difference the Lord makes in our life, is that we have hope. Yea, though I walk through that valley in shadow of death, I don't need to fear the evil because You are with me. That is a beautiful comfort to those who believe.
You know, sometimes we're nervous to talk to people who are facing death or in the hospital about spiritual things. We wonder whether or not it's appropriate. Is there a way, let's say the person doesn't have a faith like Brent had. I mean, that's a beautiful faith.
Yes.
But they start to have an openness. Can you lead them to that? What do you say? I know you listen first.
Sure.
I know you're sensitive, but are there things you do to help people?
Sure. And I think one of the best things to do is, number one, express, first of all, you're caring for that person. So-and-so, you've been very special to me. I've come by and visited you now for several days, and I've met your family, and I've been walking this journey with you. And I just need to ask you today, where is your relationship with the Lord? What is going on with you spiritually? That opens the door and invites the person to express what their condition is. They may say to you, I don't know, I've never given it much thought until now, but I'm frightened. You know, and then you can say, why are you frightened? You know, they may say, well, I just don't know what's going to happen to me after I die. This is an open door. Isn't that a beautiful opportunity to be able to say, oh, but the Bible tells us what's going to happen to us when we die. And so that opens the way for you to share with that person. And what you're going to find is that most people, at the time of their death, are open. They really are. They may not know everything. They may have known very little in their life, but it is amazing how God draws particularly near to those who are dying. It is very obvious to me.
I remember as I was working as a nurse before I was a pastor, I was taking care of a person in the hospital who had contracted HIV and was dying and was a bilateral amputee and was blind. And it was just when this was coming up, and in terms of hospital work, and many of the nurses and different things were afraid of that. And frankly, I was somewhat frightened as well. And I was in there talking to Jerome that day, and as I was talking to him, I said something. I said, I don't know if I should ask you this or not, but what's your relationship with God? And he just began to cry. And he said, God would never, ever love me. And he told me everything he did wrong. And I was able to share with him that God did love him. And he came to know the Lord.
Beautiful.
2 days before he died.
Praise God.
So the Lord will open up a way.
Oh, absolutely. And especially if you're showing caring. You know, my friends, there's nothing more precious than connecting with another human being. The Bible tells us not to turn from our own flesh. And you know, the touch of a hand is so important. Your touch is so important. Sometimes we, withdraw from people we don't know. We're kind of timid. We don't know how to act. But believe me, the same needs you have, others have too. And people just want to know in the midst of their dying, in the midst of their suffering, that someone really cares for them. And so that touch is real important. And just touching someone while you talk to them is real important to help them to open up, because they feel like it's a safe place. And we need to create safe places. That's what you did that day for Jerome.
Coming up next, we'll take some questions from our live audience, so please stay with us.
Are you grieving the loss of a loved one? Do you find yourself struggling to understand God in your sorrow? What about your children? How do you help them? We have just the books for you. Call or write today to receive your free gift of The Ultimate Survivor and Helping Kids Deal with Death. Just write to us at Up Close, Post Office Box 220, West Frankfort, Illinois, 62896. Or call us during regular business hours, 800-752-3226 or 618-627-4651. Ask for Up Close offer number 1. Next week on Up Close,
We'll center on one of the most pervasive problems of our generation, drug addiction. There is great hope for recovery, as Amanda is a testimony to.
When I met Amanda was during the time that she was pregnant and Dave was just getting out of prison and those kind of things, and so I work with addicts. And the only thing I know for sure about God and about recovery is God does amazing things with us.
You know, I didn't realize that slowly I was being dragged into this world that was going to take me 7 years to get out of.
next week on Up Close, escaping drugs and alcohol addictions. Don't miss it.
Welcome back to Up Close. We're talking today about death and dying and the different stages of grieving. And now we're going to take some questions from our audience. Glad today to be able to take a few questions. Marty, are you ready?
Sure.
Well, what's our first question? What's your name and what's your question?
My name's Kevin, and the question is, in your experience, have you seen it to be any easier for someone dealing with the death or the grieving process when they've been able to see the death coming versus a sudden, unexpected death?
Definitely. The longer you have to prepare, the more helpful it is. It does not mean that there are not individuals who stay in denial right up until the time of the death and therefore go through a shock type experience. But it is always something that in the back of their mind they have been dealing with, and so they much more readily adjust to the reality than a person who, like Mike, endured a very sudden announcement of a death. And certainly with the daughter, as he stated so well, you don't expect your children to go before you. So, yes, definitely, it's more difficult.
Thank you for the question. Excellent question. We have another question. Could you give us your name and then the question?
My name is Kimberlyn, and I was wondering, how do you reach out to an atheist who is dying?
Very good question, honey. And it's not easy, is it? I'm going to make a statement here I hope that you can understand, and I hope everybody else does too. We cannot force anybody to believe anything they don't want to. Isn't that true? But we can certainly give them the opportunity to hear God's word and to make a decision for him if at all possible. So what I would say to that person first is how much I care for them. You know, no matter how they feel about God, how much I care for them. And then I would let them know, because I care so much for you, it matters to me that you're still in a place where you don't want to talk about God, for instance. But when you're ready, I just want you to know that I'm here. Because I love God and I know he loves you. And he's the one who put the love in my heart that I have for you. So when you're ready to talk to me, please talk to me about God. I would love to share that with you. And then you have to allow them the decision whether or not they want to talk about God.
I think we should ask Mike a little bit about that too, because you were basically an atheist, isn't that right?
I knew God. I just didn't want to say there wasn't one in case I met him one day.
Okay, so you were kind of right there.
Yeah, I was there. I didn't know Jesus, but I didn't want to say there wasn't one in case I met him. But I tell you what, for me, it was friends who were Christians that came up and just sat down, just like Marty said, and they put their hand on my shoulder or on my knee, and they just sat there with me. And if I wanted to say something, they listened, and they never offered a feedback until I asked them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very important.
So that silent presence.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So we have another question. Catherine, I already know your name. Catherine McGrath. What is your question?
My question is, when someone dies that's a close loved one, sometimes that person becomes withdrawn and isolated because of the grief that they're going through. How can you help that person without being pushy or intrusive into their lives?
Just to kind of draw them out, you mean? Is that what you're saying? Mm-hmm. Okay. You know, it's not easy. You know, sometimes we have to wait a little bit. The truth is you have to give them their space, too. They're allowed that. Nothing wrong with withdrawing for a time. You really just want to make sure that when you make an overture to draw someone out, that you're not making them feel like, oh, great, now I'm having distress because now she's wanting to make me talk. Rather, it needs to be something very casual. Something like saying, let's say your friend's name or whoever is Sally. You might say, Sally, I came over to spend some time with you because I know you're going through this difficult time. So just know I'm here. I'm going to make a batch of cookies, and if you want to come in and have some, we can talk a little bit too, whatever you feel like. Well, you've just announced that you're available to her. Do you see? But you're not pushing her, trying to make her uncomfortable. Now, Sally, you need to talk to me. You haven't been talking lately. Well, what's that going to do? Sally's going to withdraw more. Isn't that true? Because nobody likes to be pushed into anything. So just make sure you just let somebody know that you're available. Love on them. Give them a hug. She'll accept that from you. And make sure that you give her time. Because everybody's different. What takes maybe a short time for you may take a long time for Marty. And that's not to say that that's bad. You know, some people like to get through grief really fast, like on a fast forward. And, you know, they're on speed. You know, let me figure out how to do this. And I think there's even times when you need to go to a counselor. If your grief is extended to the point where you're not eating, where you're maybe, in essence, being hurtful to people around you, however it may display itself in a negative, God has given that knowledge for a reason, and that's good. But just remember that of all things it's going to be healing to us, our relationships are. And that's the most important thing you offer your friends. So just keep coming around her, even when she's quiet. Be there, and let her know you're there for her.
Mike, do you have anything to add from a man's perspective?
I think the main thing is to be there, because what we found in our life is in a couple of weeks, it's over for everybody else. But it's not over for you. And our true friends have been there. That's how you can be a real friend, is to be there after the first couple of weeks.
After the first couple of weeks. Thank you for that. We have another question. What's your name and what's your question?
My name is Sylvia, and I was wondering how you help children get through the grief process when they have experienced the long-term illness and death of a sibling.
Of a sibling. Oh, that's really good. In fact, I had an experience. I'm glad you asked me that. I just thought about it even as you asked it. Very near and dear to my heart. But of a little patient that I was called to minister to because of the need for a Spanish minister. And this little patient was dying from a brain tumor. And he had a brother who was there with him. And it was the most beautiful thing because they were so close, and it was just cute to watch them. And one of the things that we did with them is we allowed the sibling to paint with the dying brother a beautiful pillowcase. And they painted one for each of them because they liked to sleep together. And the idea being, we told this sibling, now, when your brother finally goes to sleep and is resting, you know, and just finally dies, because you have to use that word. They need to know the difference between, or else they think they can just go in there and say, wake up and play with me. But finally dies, you're going to have both pillows to sleep with so that you'll never forget your brother. So sometimes an activity like that with young children that helps them connect with the memory of that person even before they die. So that when they do, they have something to hold on to. Do you know that reminds them of a wonderful memory, a wonderful time? We gave them little, it was almost like little nuts, little peanuts that they ate while they were drawing this. And the joy and the interaction between them was so beautiful. And then the mother brought a picture to us of the two of them sleeping on their pillowcases. And that warmed me when he was gone. The mother said that was the greatest comfort to him. And he just kept holding on to that pillow because to him that was like holding on to his little brother. So those are things that are helpful. And be creative. God, he's a creative God. And in times of loss, he's going to help us to figure out what things we can do individually for that child that will help them. Thank you.
Okay. Could you give us your name and your question, please?
Larry. I'm an ex-veteran, of a war, past war. And I was wondering, well, even myself, I sometimes feel guilty of a comrade getting killed. And a lot of my friends, are the same way. How do you deal with this problem?
With the guilt problem, is that what you're talking about? I can see that that's a very personal pain that you have. And I will tell you this, my friend, that if your friend, your comrade, were back and could talk to you, they wouldn't hold you guilty. Guilt is something we take on ourselves.
Yeah, sometimes we feel it.
Yeah, we hold on to it. And one of the things that the Lord came to take from us is our guilt, all of us. How many of us are not guilty of so many things? And sometimes with you it was such a visible thing. The death of a comrade in wartime, for instance, is such a visible thing, and you never forget it. It's pressed in your mind. But how many times in life we haven't done things that have caused injury to others, sometimes spiritual death, we could say. But the Lord came to set us free from all that. And do you know that when we turn that over to the Lord, when we genuinely turn it over to Him, His healing is perfect in us? And your friend would want that for you. Because I know that at any moment, in fact, I've said to people, I said, isn't it interesting how when someone dies, sometimes we're feeling guilty, maybe we didn't do something. Even if we didn't have a part in the fact that maybe we thought we didn't cover them enough or we didn't help them enough, whatever the issues may be. That friend would be the first one to say, no, buddy, I didn't feel that way about you. That could happen to anybody. Guess what? We're human. We have limitations. But the Lord came to set you free, and you need to be free. The most precious thing you gave your friend was your love and your affection, not your perfection. Only the Lord has that. And someday we will all be perfected, and He will too. But God bless you, and let go and let God. If you need extra help with that, because you may need to process, I do recommend that you seek a professional counselor who can help you with that, and God will too. Prayerfully use the Word of God, His Scripture, friends, relationships, but seek out what you need. God, for a purpose, has those professionals there to help you. But God bless you. God bless you.
Thank you for the question, and thank all of you for the questions that you have shared today, the very personal questions. And Marty, as we close out, you have some closing thoughts for us?
Sure. First of all, I just want to say how intimately we each have been touched by this topic, haven't we? There isn't one of us in this room, I'm sure I can say that safely. And in my own life, in my own way, with my own tragedies and my own losses, having lost a baby, and then having almost lost the son of promise, as I called him, at age 9 from an automobile accident. Our son was on life support and not expected to live. I can tell you, my friends, that this world is not a place where we are going to be free of pain and sorrow. Would you agree? It's not a place. And we need to remember that these things come on all people. This is not something unique to any one person. We all suffer loss and we suffer grief. And so how beautiful it is to know that God has promised not that His people won't have problems. Psalms 34 tells us many are the difficulties of the righteous. Did it say a few? No, many are the difficulties of the righteous. The only difference is it said God helps them through each one of them. And I have accepted that in my life, that the Lord has intended and sometimes permitted things in my life for my good. and that my ministry has been strengthened through those experiences, and that God wants us to become stronger people through them, not weaker, and to say, I know who can help you. I know where my hope lies. And someday, this dying, we're so fearful of it, and yet all of us are dying. Is that true? All of us are dying. We, like garments, are wearing away. But the Lord has promised a day, a beautiful day, when the dead in Christ will arise first, when we'll be caught up together with Him in the clouds, and when we will always be with the Lord. And He asks us to comfort ourselves with these words. That's in Thessalonians. It's beautiful, those verses. And so I always say, Father, help me to hold on to the hope. Help me inspire the hope in people's lives. Help me to relationship with them and walk with them so that I don't turn from my own flesh, so that I'm available to each one and give them an opportunity to know that they can come to me, that I can create those environments with the Holy Spirit so that they are open to His healing. And God will bless us, because God needs people today who will say neither life nor death nor anything will be able to separate me from the love that I have in Jesus.
Amen. We want to thank our guests today, Mike McKinnon, Debbie Edgerton, and Marty Jones, for sharing with us. I, as a host, get to have the final thoughts. And as I thought about what I could share, I went back to that testimony that we heard earlier of Brent and his final words. And throughout Scripture, there are many different stories about people's final words and how meaningful they can be. I think of Paul as he was there with the people in Ephesus in Acts 20. And he shared his final words, and they cried together, but they had had a wonderful time together. Mm-hmm. And I think of in 1 John, where he ends that last book, and he says, little children, keep yourself from idols. His final words, terms of endearment. And then I think of our Lord's last words, that He's coming again soon, and that He wants us to be faithful. So I don't know what your final words or what the words you've said today are to those around you. But think about them as being your final words. And if you do that every day, you'll be prepared. You'll be prepared for whatever life brings. Thanks for being with us.